So say that again. So anyway.
Who are you?
Who are you? Yeah. So
who are you?
my enemies call me Dick Dubé. So I'm Richard Dubé. I'm the director of online education for Siebel. I'm a microbiologist biochemist, so that's how I started with Labatt's and in the quality control, and I've been in this industry for 40 years. So yeah, that's me. So I did a stint of 10 years or so teaching high school.
Yeah.
So now I came full circle. In my life, I did two things. I brewed and I taught. Now I'm teaching brewing. So that's perfect combination.
So what's your favorite malt?
Favorite malt? Good Lord, that's a good question. You know what? Is because there's a long history to it. Probably my favorite one is Munich.
Yeah?
Yep. I developed, or I shouldn't say develop. I tweaked a recipe of a craft brewer that I work for, and I incorporated Munich malt in there, to be exact, at 8% Munich malt, and it made the entire difference. And that year we won a medal for it. So I love Munich malt.
And favorite hop? On one of my videos, I got the hop wrong. I know that you're allergic to Amarillo, but I said Mosaic, but it was meant to be Amarillo.
It's very interesting. I kind of, and we don't know what it is. I have no clue what it could be. But Amarillo. I especially when it's 100% Amarillo, I drink a third of a pint, and I get so stuffed up. The nose, the sinuses, can't breathe, very uncomfortable. And when we were together in Australia, that's where I kind of oh baby, okay, that's a turn. Yeah, he's a good driver. He's on the right side.
I'm the expert of this.
He's on the right side, meaning the correct side. Correct side of the thing. But yeah, so Amarillo is something that I have to stay away from.
Not your favorite.
No, definitely not.
So what is your favorite?
You know what? Okay, well, yeah, to answer your question, I'm gonna tell you what I don't like, because this is more appropriate than to say if I have a favorite, because a favorite goes by style and how it's well incorporated into the recipe and so on. I don't like the dank oniony, garlicky character. I just don't get that at all. I'm much more into citrus, tropical fruit.
Resiny?
Kind of resiny, not that much. So some American hops are really piney and very piney, resinous. Not too fond of that. But I like the classic one, and it's probably because of my background. But the hallertau, the Milfeu, the Saz. The Czech sauce, that kind of stuff, I kind of like it. It's nice floral, and it's light, and it's very nice.
What about favorite yeast?
Favorite yeast? Let me think. Well, again, favorite yeast. You know what? It's kind of a weird question, because it really depends on the style that you're growing. Okay. And it really depends what you want to do with your yeast. Okay, does the yeast become truly another part of your recipe, meaning that you want the yeast to really impart something to the flavor profile of your beer, or if you just want the yeast to be just a background player that keeps it very neutral. So, and also when you're looking at, let's say, performance, in terms of what kind of equipment do I have, I know the personality of my fermenters and my glycol system. So do I need a yeast that's going to sink like a rock, or I can handle a little bit more powdery yeast because I have a centrifuge? So to me, it's a tough question to answer. But I would go. I kind of really like the. the Munich Classic. I'm going to stay in the Munich. I'm going to stay in the Munich.
If only there was a Munich hall.
So French Canadian with a Kentuckian accent and some German background. But yeah, I like the Munich Classic. I think it reacts very, very well. I think that it gives you really what you're looking for. You can play with it. You can influence it a little bit one way or another. So I can like it.
So would there be a favourite beer styles, or do you want to talk about how you reckon there's too many beer styles with your 100 beer styles?
Oh, good Lord. Yeah, probably some people won't like me if I say that. But anyway, I just came back from a famous judging competition, and we're up to 107 categories, and some really you have to question, how where they came up with those. I mean, oh well, who cares? It's called Emerging IPA. Emerging IPA. Emerging IPA. This is Natalie, by the way, our digital guru, who's going to edit all this properly. Yeah, so Emerging IPA.
Yeah.
Okay.
What does that mean?
So it's a melting pot of black IPA, white IPA, red IPA, brut IPA. What else is in there? Fruited IPA, spiced IPA. Okay, so we look at each other, meaning the judge, around the table, and we're reading the descriptors, and then we say, okay, what are we going to do with this? The brewers had to write, okay, let's say it's a brut IPA, blah blah blah, with something. Okay? Then we say, okay, we're going to search for the IPA first. If we get an IPA, then we'll pay attention to what's on the bottle, and see what we can do out of that. Rock on, baby, rock on! Another bunch of booze. So anyhow, so there was one, for instance.
Yeah.
It was brut IPA, okay, with enzyme. Okay, cool.
Yep.
That makes sense. And then lactose.
Right, okay.
So it was like, okay, dude. So what is it exactly you wanted to do? There was another one that was brut IPA with enzyme and added, let me think, pineapple, peach, raspberry, vanilla, and something else.
That's a lot. That's a lot of stuff.
Yeah, exactly. It comes to a point where you're putting so much that you're just muddling everything instead of having layers that you can define. Me, this is my brewing philosophy. Me, I like a beer that is layered, meaning that I can detect this, I can detect that, I can detect this.
Yep.
Yeah, that's the cool one. But yeah, so my philosophy is more about layering than giving you a huge character in your face that this is all you get. Like a Jolly Rancher. Sometimes some of the IPA is just like one big huge note with nothing else. I like it layered, and sometimes people try to layer, but they put too much. So instead of layering, they just make a melting pot, and it becomes very, very muddy, and it's not very very nice.
Is it kind of like when I gave you that boiled egg when we were in the airport, and I put about a centimetre thick of Vegemite on top, and said, "Try this." What do you think?
Oh, good Lord! I'm still gurgling every time I just think about this thing. This guy gives me the Vegemite thing. Okay, that's still don't know exactly what the heck is that, but
it's made from dead yeast.
It's supposed to be paper thin. Okay, paper thin, and then you put it paper thin, and then you scrape the excess, off of your toast. This guy, he gave me about a quarter inch, a couple, for our European, call it a couple of millimeters of Vegemite. Man, that stuff was nasty. It was nasty.
What do you think about Vegemite in a beer?
Well, there's yeast in there. There's yeast in there. And I think I shared that one with you. When I started with Molson, I remember this older gentleman. He was working entirely in the yeast room, okay, in the yeast storage room, right?
Yeah.
And that gentleman at the time, he was probably like 56 or something like this, but good guy. But, and then I was the young kid. He said, if you want to come in my yeast room, you have to abide by my rules. And my rules are, when you come in the morning, you have to take a pint of yeast slurries. The guy was drinking a pint of yeast slurry every day.
That was morning. That was his coffee.
Yep, it was a pint of this. Have you ever tried this?
I have. Yeah.
It is tough.
And imagine if it's just after a dry hop. You know, when taking the hops off the tank.
Well, the beauty in those days. I'm talking back in the 80s. So you weren't born yet.
I wasn't born yet.
Yeah. Okay, people, I'm the old geezer. I'm prehistoric, but that's all right. But yeah, it's no. There was at least there was no super duper hopped beers. So you're talking about 10, 12 IBUs and no dry hopping. But yeah, that was rough. So anyway, Vegemite. Thank you very much, Mike. Vegemite. It's a Vegemite.
What do you think, with your years of experience, the biggest need in the industry is right now?
You know what? It's I've seen call it the first craft beer revolution back in the late 80s, early 90s. Okay, and you have very common things, meaning that people really enthusiastic about beer. They really do it by heart, with their heart, and they love it. People are a little bit more educated, if you will, okay? But that being said, there's still a tremendous amount. There's a big vacuum of education and theory and understanding why is it important to do this. Because what's happening is that we're getting people that are really enthusiastic. I would say, I want to throw a percentage, but probably 95% of the people out there, the brewers, are actually from home brewing, okay, which is cool. Me personally, I never homebrewed in my life. Never homebrewed in my life. Became, like I said, from microbiology, biochemistry, and then stayed in industry like this. But, so a lot of people have been successful at the home brewing level. Then they say, well, I want to make a career out of that, okay? And they do become relatively successful in their tap room. And now they want to move to the next step, which is to start to distribute their beer. Okay? Unfortunately, they totally missed the principles, the fundamental principle that will help you be very successful when it's outside the tap room. Mm-hmm. So going back to the original question, is that what is missing? I think education is still missing tremendously, and that's why we need to take every avenue to push brewing education and formal brewing education. Of course, the hands-on is important. I mean, you have to be able to clamp a valve and that kind of stuff, but you have to understand why you're doing things so that
100%.
I always say the brewer is two things. We are a glorified janitor, right? And we are a fairly decent problem solver. But to be a good problem solver, you have to understand why is it important to not splash your mash like crazy and whip it in your mash mixer, that kind of stuff that will obviously affect your physical and flavor stability down the road. So
you can drop that on the floor because I know you like to use both hands. Spending 3 weeks with you.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Stay on the road. Stay on the freaking road. As you can see, it's very
limited.
As you can see, it's very sunny here in Basin Harbor, where we are. But yeah, kind of cool. So education, we have to push.
I don't think I need to ask the emergency styles one question because you've basically already answered that. with there's too many. What do you think about trends, brewing trends? Same kind of philosophy there?
Brewing trend is it's really interesting. When I started with more on the craft beer industry, and this is what I liked when I started with that craft brewer, is that to the opposite, or not the opposite, but to the contrary of the big guys, where the big guys are driven by marketing, okay? That craft brewer was still driven by the brewer, meaning that, hey, we're going to brew what we like, and we're going to make sure that sales and marketing understand what we have, and then we're going to send them sell that product, okay? Unfortunately, it's not a concept or an approach that is viable on large scale. Okay, so you can do that on a small scale, but as soon as you want to go bigger, then to be able to maintain your capacity and so on and so forth, you have to be closer to the consumer and see what they want. Unfortunately, right now, what I feel is that it's we used to say flavor of the month. Now it's flavor of the week. Okay, so every week you have to come up with something new, and you need to feed that frenzy of having always something new. So we do it in our brewery. I'm not a big fan of it, but unfortunately, it is almost necessary. So you create yourself core brands that you do very, very, very well, that you like and that you push and that you explain, but then you really have to have that side, I call it the side portfolio of things that change you all the time.
Yeah, and you need your core. Your core's where most of your money's going to come from. So it's interesting to see breweries that do not have a core range, they just have flavor of the month.
Yeah.
I really do wonder where they're going to be in 5 years' time, if that's the case.
Yeah, absolutely correct. And the thing is this, and then we have applied that concept a little bit in our brewery, is that we have different locations, and we are kind of specializing those locations to do something specific.
Yeah.
Okay? So we bring, let's say, our core brands from the main location. So we have a few taps of that. But then we have a few taps that are special to that location. Okay? So one is more experimental, and the other one is more barrel house. Okay? So that's kind of fun, because that brings the consumer that says, oh wow, yeah, I really like their premium lager over there. So I can have that. Oh, geez. We're gonna make it, people. We're gonna make it. Promise. We're gonna make it.
Foggy over there.
Yep. But yeah, so you bring people that tasted your premium lager at one location,
Yeah.
but then they come to another location because they want to have another environment, if you will, and you know what, they want to try something else, and I think that works for them.
So what's your worst brewing mistake? Worst brewing mistake? Yeah. Well, how many years have you brewed?
No, this
So
one.
there must be a list.
Actually, no, there's not a list, but there's one so dumb. I mean, so dumb. It's incredible. And people, believe me, I'm a scientist. I know science a little bit. But this one was like, at the end of the day, maybe, I don't know, it's dry hops and dry banana peel, something like this, whatever. But we say, hey, we need to do an ice hop.
Oh yeah.
Glycol capacity is not low enough to freeze the beer, so how can we freeze the beer and have ice and remove the ice and concentrate the beer, right? So it goes like this, and that shows you how long ago it is. So you know what? We're gonna take an off Stevens keg, right? Yeah, so with the opening, right?
Yeah.
We're gonna fill it with dry ice. And we're going to put the keg in the fermenter.
Whoa.
So what do you think happened? Okay? So the dry ice sublimated, created so much pressure in that small keg, okay, that when I'm not lying, honest to God, I'm not lying. The next morning I came back, okay, the keg had exploded inside the fermenter, knocked the roof, and de-anchored 3 of the 4 legs.
Wow.
The fermenter was like this.
Wow.
3 legs de-anchored, all the glycol lines and the piping was all screwed up. So that was
the glycol everywhere? Did you
Huh?
warm up all the beers? Did the glycol line snap?
no.
That's so like
Yeah. It was. Geez. That was not. Yeah, I can laugh about it now, but think about it. It's so stupid. You fill the keg,
wow.
with dry ice, bung it, put it in the fermenter with the it was a small cylindrical conical fermenter with the liquid, and say, yeah, it's gonna freeze, around it. Came back the next morning. What's wrong with that tank? Yeah, it's a.
What about worse infection? Like, going from brewing to the lab.
Yeah.
For me, that was one of my favorite parts was, when there was an infection, because how do we solve it? What is it? How do we identify it? What do we solve it? So what would be your worst infection?
You're not talking about your infection, right? Because people listen to me. This is my teaching side of it. Do not call infection in the brewery. It's a contamination. Okay? Infection can involve yeast, but it's something else. Okay? That we're not getting into here. Contamination. So you have a
What's the contamination?
So you have a contamination. So you want to figure out where it comes from.
Yeah. What's one? What's an example? What's your worst one?
I think, severe one. Never had one. The principle in microbiology is to understand that the brewery is a natural ecosystem. Mm-hmm. It has its own microflora. All you need to do is to maintain it to a level below that it's going to start causing you problems. That being said, when you start detecting, like, let's say, Pidiococci, you really have to push the emergency. It's still low, meaning that you don't have like major diacetyl problems or stuff like that. But you need to take care of it more closely. But tell you a story about kind of a weird contamination. And that was kind of fun because I wrote a paper out of that and I presented this. The problem was that I was evaluating the yeast slurry every morning. Okay? Yeah. And then we had 2 criteria. One was, of course, viability, using Midland Blue, whatever. Okay, and the other one was actually contaminants. Okay, so in so many fields. I think it was less than 0.1%, something like this. So I would see a bacteria. You don't know if it's dead or alive, but you count it. Okay.
Yeah.
So I was seeing those fat rods in the yeast, and based on our spec, I was rejecting the yeast, but I was rejecting almost everything. So we had to. At one point, we didn't have any more yeast, so we had to start using. We're going to use that, and we will repropagate, and when it comes out of fermenter, we make sure we don't collect that yeast. That kind of a precaution. But every yeast was also plated, to get a confirmation.
Yeah.
I worked for months, playing with different medias and even kind of making my own recipes to try. That sucker was just not growing. It was absolutely not growing. To learn later that it's a bacteria that is kind of in a dormant form, if you will, almost impossible to grow on media, but that will keep on growing in the yeast slurry. And we found that, and it was a thermotolerant bacteria as well. I mean, we know that from after the fact. But you know where it was coming from? So I inspected everything, because I ended up finding it backing track, and I found it in the wort.
Yeah, well.
But again, not through an incubation. I started looking at the wort under the microscope, and I could see the same sucker, those same fat rods. Of course, they wouldn't grow. And make a long story short, is that in the stack leading to the mash mixer, okay, with where the grain was coming in, with the water, is that the steam was coming up, and it was caking some of the grain flour, the flour and so on, and it was never cleaned.
Right.
So when we finally kind of backtracked that, and there was actually an opening on the stack for people to open it and and hose it down and scrape it or whatever. For whatever reason, it had never been done. I mean, from memory, nobody could remember that. Nobody told me to look at that. And it was cake flour, and that was the source. That was pretty. It took a while, but it was pretty cool. I took pictures. I had pictures of those rods, and I thought, man, yeah. So that was pretty cool. So that was fun. So to go with what you said, the pleasure of investigation, taking samples. Yeah, exactly. Go back to problem solving. You got that right. So education, people. There's a lecture for that. That's my new tagline. If you don't know what I'm talking about, just go to SiebelInstitute.com. Program courses, specialized lectures. There's a lecture for that.
What do you think everyone is doing right or wrong in the industry?
What is it that we're doing right? I think that what we're doing, something that we're doing still very, very. I shouldn't say skillfully. It has nothing to do with skill, but I think that something we're doing right is that we're still collaborating together. We're still exchanging very freely information, and I think that it's what makes the industry what it is. I mean, no other industry can claim that how easy it is to share. That being said, we know darn well that it's not fully true when it comes with the big guys. Again, going back to my early days in Montreal, you had Molson, Labatt, and in those days, Carling, O'Keefe, right? And true sales and marketing were telling us, don't talk to other brewers, And us, we were calling each other and saying, hey, I need a bag of filter aid. It's okay, no problem. Come from the back, and we would open the trunk and put the bag, and go back to the brewery. So at the brewer's level, always been, even at the big guys, always like this. Yeah.
Oh, definitely.
So that is something that we do very, very well. I think what we don't do very well, and that kind of circle back a little bit to education. We get pressured by sales and demands, and we cut corners sometimes, and we end up with diacetyl bombs, or we end up with something that is under fermented or whatnot. So I think that's the portion that we still don't do very, very well. And as more and more players are coming back into the equation, we're finding that that there's still some people that don't get the fundamentals of what they're doing, and they get influenced by, oh well, I need to have that beer package next week, and the short ship aging or something like that. The big difference, I think, is that a big difference compared to back in the late 80s, early 90s, is that it's the consumer. The consumer is a little bit more educated as well. And what it does is this. What it does is that the consumer back then would say, oh, I would like to have that IPA thing, whatever that is. I would like to taste it. And then not necessarily that the beer was bad, it's just that they didn't know what to expect. They didn't like it, and said, oh man, Dan's IPA that I got, and it's just terrible, right? Okay. And instead of saying Dan's IPA is bad, they said IPA is bad.
Yeah.
So what happened is that even very, very good brewers, and they were very, very good brewers at the time, they went down the tube because they got sucked in by a consumer not understanding what they're doing, what they're tasting. Okay,
Yeah.
now we see this. We see much better educated taproom staff. Okay, me, I claim, I said, hey, I said, listen, you're my first line of attack. It doesn't matter if I produce the best beer in the world. If you don't understand what I tried to do, how can you push it to the consumer, and how can you make it them understand what it is? So the consumer now is a little bit more educated, and therefore they can say, Dan's IPA is terrible, but Richard's IPA is great, so I'm going to keep on drinking that versus this. So the difference is that the people that don't get educated, that don't get smart about their beer, they'll eventually just go down the tube simply because, not because of the consumer, just because they have not been able to provide a quality product.
Yeah, for sure.
You know what? I'm freezing now, and we have to go back to the freaking meeting. You know? So, hey, folks from Basin Harbor, Vermont, this was Dan and Dick Show.